Everyone in Elmwood had heard the story. It was told in hushed tones, passed down from generation to generation, usually around campfires or high school cafeterias. Some dismissed it as an urban legend, a tale to scare children into behaving. But for the people who had lived in Elmwood for a long time, the story carried an unsettling truth. The legend revolved around a figure known as the Whisperer. According to the story, he appeared at night, moving silently through the town, knocking on windows of certain homes. His visitations were always accompanied by faint whispers, unintelligible but strangely compelling, drawing people to the window. Those who claimed to have heard the whispers said they couldn't resist the pull, and once they opened the window, they were never seen again. Some said he was a drifter who had come through town decades ago, back when Elmwood was just a few houses around a dusty main street. He had wandered from house to house, asking for shelter, but his cold, piercing eyes and unsettling voice made people uneasy. No one in town wanted him around, so they sent him away. But when he left, the town was never the same again. Others claimed he was a spirit, the ghost of a wronged man who had died on the outskirts of Elmwood, now wandering the town in search of revenge. He knocked on the windows of the living, hoping to drag them to the other side. One thing was certain. If you heard the knock and the whispers, you were marked. Teenagers love to retell the story, especially daring each other to spend the night at the Redding House. The Redding House sat on the edge of town, abandoned for as long as anyone could remember. Its windows were boarded up, the roof sagging under the weight of time. No one had lived there in decades, and most people in Elmwood avoided the place. But for Josh and his friends, the house was a challenge. They were juniors in high school, and it was a rite of passage to spend one night there to show that you weren't afraid. "Come on, Josh," Brandon taunted as they stood at the edge of the overgrown yard. "What's the worst that could happen? We sit in an old house for a few hours, tell ghost stories, and call it a night." Josh shrugged off the uneasy feeling that had settled in his stomach. "Yeah, let's just get it over with." The group, Josh, Brandon, Ryan, and Derek, pushed their way through the bushes that had overtaken the yard. The house loomed above them, dark and foreboding, its windows like empty eyes watching their every move. Josh couldn't help but feel like they were being watched. They pried open a loose board covering one of the windows and climbed inside. The interior was worse than they expected. The walls were covered in peeling wallpaper, and the floor was thick with dust. A faint smell of mold hung in the air. "Man, this place is a dump," Derek said, wrinkling his nose. Brandon smirked. "What did you expect the Four Seasons?" They set up in what had once been the living room, using their flashlights to illuminate the space. Ryan found an old, dusty chair and sank into it, pulling a blanket from his backpack. "So what now? We just sit here and wait for the Whisperer to show up?" Derek chuckled. "Yeah, if he's real." Josh stayed quiet, his gaze darting to the windows. He had heard the stories, like everyone else. He didn't believe in the Whisperer, or at least he didn't want to. But being in the house, with the wind howling and the floor creaking, made it hard to shake the feeling that something was wrong. They spent the first couple of hours joking, sharing snacks, and making fun of the situation. The house creaked with every gust of wind. Around midnight, the mood shifted. The wind had died down, leaving the house in an eerie silence. Josh felt a heaviness settle over the room, as if the air itself had thickened with anticipation. He saw it in the faces of his friends, too. They were nervous, even if they weren't saying it. That's when they heard it, a soft knock. It was faint at first, like something tapping against the side of the house. They froze, their flashlights flickering. Josh's heart began to pound. The knock came again, louder this time, unmistakably deliberate. "Did you guys hear that?" Ryan whispered. "Probably just the wind," Derek muttered, though even he didn't sound convinced. Then came the whispers. They started softly, like someone murmuring just out of earshot. It was coming from the window. Josh's throat tightened as the whispers grew louder. The whispers were deafening now, pressing in on all sides. Josh could feel his skin crawling, as if the air itself was alive with something malevolent. Suddenly, the whispers stopped. The silence that followed was suffocating. For a long moment, none of them moved, too afraid to even breathe. Then, slowly, the door to the hallway creaked open further. In the darkness beyond, Josh thought he saw something, just a glimpse. The silence was deafening. Derek hesitated, then yanked the curtain aside. There was nothing there, just the dark yard, empty and still. "I told you," Derek said, laughing shakily. "It's nothing." But before anyone could respond, there was a loud, violent knock so forceful that the window pane rattled in its frame. The whispers returned, louder this time, wrapping around them like a cold wind. Josh felt an overwhelming urge to open the window. The pull was so strong, it was like the whispers were commanding him to let them in. Ryan stood up, his eyes wide with fear. "Guys, we need to get out of here now." Brandon nodded, but before they could move, the door to the hallway creaked open, as if someone or something was pushing it from the other side. The whispers grew louder, more frantic. It felt like they were coming from every direction, filling the room, wrapping around them like invisible tendrils. Josh's breath came in short gasps. He grabbed his backpack and ran to the window. They had climbed in through, but as he reached for it, the window slammed shut with a force that shook the house. "We're trapped," Ryan whispered. Derek grabbed a chair and threw it at the window, but it didn't crack the glass. The whispers weren't words exactly, but a low, constant hum that sent chills down his spine. Brandon stood up, his face pale. "Okay, who's messing with us?" "No one's messing with us," Josh said, his voice shaky. "It's coming from outside." Derek moved toward the window, his flashlight flickering. "Let's just check." "Okay." There's no such thing as the whisper. As soon as he reached the window, the whisper stopped. It was tall and gaunt, its features hidden in shadow, but its eyes cold and piercing seemed to glow faintly in the dark. The whisper, Brandon breathed. Without thinking, Josh bolted for the door, his heart racing. The others followed, scrambling over furniture and pushing each other in their panic to escape. They burst out of the house and into the night, not stopping till they were far down the street. The Redding house was barely visible behind them. None of them spoke as they walked back to town, their breaths coming in ragged gasps. When they finally reached the safety of Elmwood's well-lit streets, Josh glanced back one last time. The Redding house stood silent and still in the distance, but he couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching them from the shadows. They never talked about that night again. No one from their group ever returned to the Redding house, but late at night, when the wind howled through Elmwood and the shadows stretched long across the streets, Josh sometimes thought he could still hear the whispers, faint, insistent, calling him back.